I have something to share with you that has been a real labor of love. It's what I think is one of the clearest explanations of why diets don't work, and more importantly, what you can do to avoid the trap of failed weight loss. Besides the frustration and discouragement from stubborn fat that just won't go away, excess weight has a direct link to all kinds of health problems: heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, and a whole lot more. If you want to finally know the truth about failed diets and how you can turn on the body's natural ability to burn fat, pay close attention. Buckle your seatbelt, because in addition to this eye-opening lesson, I have included all kinds of bonuses. There's a downloadable cheat sheet that outlines the 3 steps to get you on your way to weight loss. You get to hear firsthand from Nicco, who will share his story about losing 109 pounds, that's right, 109, and how he is still losing. There's an amazing biblical explanation connecting these principles that I will share, and it will simply amaze and make you say, praise God. Well, it's time to dive in, so here we go. The number 1 dieting myth and how you can avoid it. I'm just so frustrated. I don't know if I should scream or cry. Honestly, I feel like doing both. That's how Rachel described her battle with obesity. Year after year, the pounds kept piling on. But in spite of multiple diets, she couldn't keep the weight off. In her words, "This isn't an issue of willpower. I've done the diets and I've lost weight. I cut calories and even joined the gym, but it never lasts." She went on to explain how now it's worse. She's just been diagnosed as pre-diabetic. Feeling like a school kid being sent to the principal's office, her doctor gave stern warning. "Rachel, you better do something about this or I'll have to prescribe drugs." "It's not like I haven't tried," her words echoed. "I did what they told me. I cut the fats, ate less, exercised more. And here I am, heavier than I've ever been. And now I'm looking at diabetes." Rachel sighed. "I don't know what to do." As the saying goes, the story you're about to hear is true, but the names have been changed to protect the innocent. Although not her true name, Rachel is a real person, and she's not alone. In fact, she's like so many others I've sat knee to knee with, sharing tears as their story unfolds. Perhaps she's like you. If so, I want to tell you the same thing I told her. You're not alone. And more importantly, there is a solution. Lasting weight loss and the health and vitality that go along with it are within your reach. It's just a matter of knowing the truth and learning how to win the battle. Rachel, the fact of the matter is that you, along with so many others, have been duped. The old mantra of eat less, move more sounds good. It just doesn't work. Tell me if this sounds familiar. We'll call it Healthy Diet 101. And it goes like this. Maintaining a healthy weight is plain and simple. It's like balancing a checkbook. Income equals calories in, and expenditures are the combined energy of exercise and the basic life-sustaining needs of the body, called the basal metabolic expenditures, also known as basal metabolic rate. Things like maintaining your body temperature, respiration, heart contraction, digestion, and many more. They all require energy. In fact, a lot of energy. An ideal body weight is what happens when the calories in equal the calories out. Obesity is the result of an imbalance. Too many calories in and not enough expenditure on the other side of the arrow leads to accumulation. In this case, body fat. More and more body fat. the dreaded march toward obesity. If the problem is too many calories in and not enough calorie burning on the other side of the arrow, the solution seems logical. Reduce the calories coming in and accelerate the expenditure with exercise. There's only one problem. As logical as the remedy of eat less and move more sounds, it doesn't work. You know it, and I know it. In fact, it's the ugly secret that no one talks about. And should there be any doubt, the studies prove it time and time again. Reputable studies conclude that calorie cutting, fat restricting, exercise increasing weight loss programs fail big time. In a 7-year-long study to determine the benefit of a low-fat diet for the reduction of weight and cardiovascular disease, 50,000 women were divided into 2 groups, a control group and the study group. For 1 year, the study group received regular supervision with nutritional counseling. As a result, they effectively reduced daily calories by 19%. Fat calories were cut from 39% to 30%. And then with an emphasis on vegetables and fruits, carbohydrates were bumped up from 44 to 52%, and their overall activity, like exercise, rose by 14%. Across the board, these dedicated women embraced the eat less, move more philosophy in a serious way, no holding back. What kind of help did the control group get? Well, with the exception of receiving a copy of the United States Dietary Guidelines, they were left to their regular dietary habits. Basically, they got a pep talk, encouraging healthy eating, but not much more. With a full year of supervised diet and exercise, you would expect to see significant improvement in the study group, and there was. At the end of the first year, the study group had lost over 4 pounds. But remember, this is a 7-year study. Obesity and cardiovascular disease are conditions that develop over years. Successful strategies to combat these conditions must be effective over the long haul. It's one thing to lose weight for a special occasion, like a wedding or vacation, but lifelong health requires lasting weight loss. And that's when the luster of those coveted 4 pounds started to dull for the study group. At year 2, body weight began to increase. All the hard work seemingly in vain. But we have to stop here and make something perfectly clear. Like Rachel, the change from weight loss to weight gain was not a problem of willpower. They were sticking to the low-calorie, low-fat, increased activity diet. But the weight still came back, and back, and back, until after 7 years of committing to a low-calorie, low-fat, increased activity lifestyle, there was negligible difference when compared to the control group who kept eating more or less the same diet from when the whole process began. Visibly shaken, with a tear in her eye, I reassured Rachel, something is to blame, and it's not you. Plain and simple, you have gotten bad advice. It's time to undo the damage. And the first step is to learn the facts about what happens when calories go in your body. Research shows the old eat less, move more model is a bust. So rather than rely on more bad advice, we are going to examine the facts so we can get to the truth about lasting weight loss and the health and vitality that go along with it. The key to understanding weight gain is to think checkings and savings, as in checking and savings account. Amazingly, how we manage our personal finances is similar to how the body manages calories. On a basic level, calories and dollars are the same thing. They represent the potential to do work. essentially stored energy. If that connection is a little fuzzy, think of it this way. You work in exchange for dollars. In essence, dollars represent work. The saying, "I worked hard for that dollar," is more than a cliche. For many, it's a literal statement. Whether brain power or the sheer exertion of physical labor, we burn energy to earn a dollar. Dollars are work, and work is energy. Personal finance is a matter of managing dollars. It's what we learned back in the day when they still taught home ec. It's pretty simple, really. Everyone has built-in expenses. Things like utilities, a car payment, insurance, and groceries. Those costs must be met to maintain a household. In terms of the body, these basic expenses are called the Basal Metabolic Expenditure, or BME. It's the energy required to keep us alive. Maintaining a body temperature of 98.6, a resting heart rate of around 80 beats per minute, respiration, the energy required to digest food, and more. Each person's body has a set requirement of needed calories, basal metabolic expenditure. The BME varies from person to person, with the biggest distinction determined by gender. Women burn about 1,400 calories and men 1,800. When managing household finances, a checking account is where we keep money for day-to-day expenses. The checking account is intended for regular debits and deposits. And for most people, it's not where they keep their rainy day fund. For those resources, savings is the preferred method. Checking and savings. Day-to-day funds versus rainy day or reserve funds. For those intent on building their nest egg, whether focused on college tuition or retirement, income in excess of the basic needs is deposited in savings. With time, money accumulates. The savings account grows. You can probably guess where we're going with this analogy. Body fat is the body's savings account. How you handle your day-to-day finances parallels how the body manages calories. By definition, calories are a measurement of energy. The foods you eat have a certain calorie content, an amount of energy that is managed in one of two ways, either burned through normal metabolic activity or stored for future use. Here's where the checking and savings analogy requires closer examination. Incoming calories go to one of two places, checking or savings. When it comes to your body, the checking account is located in the liver and muscles. Checking account calories are in the form of glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose or blood sugar. The body's checking account has a preset limit. There's only so much glycogen or blood sugar that can be stored. For the typical person, glycogen stores last for about 24 hours without being replenished. When the checking account has reached its limit, additional calories are deposited in the savings account as, you guessed it, fat. And fat can be stored throughout the body with essentially no limit. Let's pause here and make a note of how we've already departed from the popular understanding of calories in and calories out. Traditionally, excess calories are assumed to just transform into fat. However, that's not entirely accurate. Instead, calories entering the body are directed to either checking or savings. Those going to checking are in the form of glycogen, and there's a limit to how much can be stored. If the checking account limit has not been reached, calories will continue to be deposited into the checking account as glycogen. Once the checking account has reached its storage limit, which is about 24 hours of basal metabolic expenses, the excess goes into savings. But they first must be converted to fat. Fat is uniquely suited for long-term storage. We know that fat is the body's answer for a rainy day. In fact, in times of calorie deprivation, It's the difference between life and death. Of course, when fat accumulates to the point of obesity, these concerns quickly fade, especially when much of the disease that is destroying so many lives is tied to the excess accumulation of body fat. I reminded Rachel that earlier we came to the realization that something is to blame for the problem of failed weight loss. There's something we're missing that explains why the savings account gets bigger and bigger as fat deposits keep piling up. It's time to uncover that missing truth. Are you ready? Making sense of increasing fat is simple. Just think overdraft protection. That's right, overdraft protection. If you're not familiar with this term, it's a service banks provide that avoids the mishap of an overdrawn checking account, also known as a bounce check. In the event of a zero balance, the bank draws funds from your savings account to cover incoming checks. Without overdraft protection, incoming checks would bounce. Why? Because there's no money there. Overdraft protection continues to draw off of the savings account until a deposit is made to checking. As soon as money is deposited in the checking account, overdraft protection is deactivated. If the need arises in the future, as long as there's money in savings, it can be tapped into all over again. Our body has a metabolic version of overdraft protection. It is a critical feature that ensures a supply of energy to meet our basal metabolic expenditures. This is how it works. Glycogen stores are the body's checking account. Once depleted, the body's overdraft protection is activated. Overdraft protection in the body means tapping into the fat deposited in the body's savings account. That's right, those unwanted pounds of stubborn fat. Losing fat is a matter of activating the body's overdraft protection. Rachel was ecstatic. She said, I want to turn on my overdraft protection right now and start burning fat. To understand how the body burns fat, we need to talk about insulin, the hormone responsible for activating overdraft protection. Insulin is released when you eat. Insulin turns on energy storage and turns off the burning of fat. In simple terms, when insulin levels rise, fat storage is activated. Conversely, decreased insulin signals fat burning. For Rachel and everyone else concerned about too much body fat, insulin is the key. Lowering your insulin activates overdraft protection, triggering the fat burning process. Increased insulin turns off overdraft protection and starts the fat storing process. This point is super important and represents a major departure from the traditional eat less, move more weight loss model. Understanding insulin and its influence on body fat explains why the eat less, move more approach to weight loss doesn't work. Here's why. When you eat food, insulin levels go up. Increased insulin turns on fat storage and turns off fat burning. Eating less food still causes a rise in insulin. Let me just make this clear. As long as you eat food, even though it's not as much, you'll still trigger the release of insulin. Food is food, and the body's response is insulin. In terms of checking and savings and overdraft protection, eating food is like depositing money in the checking account. No need for overdraft protection. In spite of reduced caloric intake, over the long haul, body fat remains unaffected, and with time, fat reserves might even increase. Read between the lines. You get fatter, even though calories have been cut. Here's a fact that should concern advocates of diets that focus on a particular macronutrient, like carbohydrates, protein, or fat. All foods, to varying degrees, stimulate the release of insulin. With few exceptions, carbohydrates have the greatest insulin-stimulating effect, especially refined carbs, like breakfast cereals, canned fruits and syrup, pancakes, waffles, and candy bars. A big surprise for many is the insulin-raising effect of protein. Surprisingly, a juicy steak has a similar insulin effect as whole grain bread. And while dietary fat alone does little to stimulate the release of insulin, combining fat with carbohydrates has a synergistic effect. The net result is a more intense and longer-lasting insulin response. Next time you're tempted by the local barista with a breakfast muffin, look the other way. This concoction of sugar, flour, and oils will set in motion a tidal wave of insulin. Remember, insulin turns on fat storing and turns off fat burning. Elevated insulin blocks overdraft protection. And if overdraft protection remains inactive, your body cannot access the savings account of fat. It means you won't burn fat. This is when Rachel said, "You've lost me, doc. If insulin keeps my body from burning fat, how do you explain the pounds I've lost with past diets?" Well, I grinned and said, "Remember how we compared basal metabolic expenditure and home ec to explain how the body manages calories? Well, suppose you had a pop quiz in home economics, and one of the questions was about stretching a budget in the event your income goes down. Well, the only way to stretch a budget in the face of less income is to reduce your expenses. In this case, turn down the thermostat, use less electricity, take shorter showers. Day-to-day life may be less comfortable, but at least you'll keep a roof over your head and you'll live to tell about it. Well, your body does the same thing. A cut in calories triggers a cut in the basal metabolic expenditures, body temperature, heart rate, mental function, strength, all reduced in an effort to make do with fewer calories. Of course, there is a lag from the time you cut calories and when the energy savings effect of a lower BME fully kick in. It's during that lag that people on a calorie-restricted diet experience the greatest weight loss. But once the reduced energy demands from the lowered BME take effect, weight loss levels off, explaining why, irrespective of the particular diet, if the strategy is to cut calories and eat less, initially it works, but eventually the weight loss plateaus. All diets work in the short term. It's basic home ec. How do you maintain a household on a reduced income? Cut expenses, trim the sales, make do with less. Your body does the same. It takes a little time to fully adjust, but once accustomed to the budget cuts, life goes on. In fact, prudent home economics teaches to cut a little extra, to give yourself a buffer in case income goes down even more. It's the rainy day principle on an extreme level. Guess what? Your body does the same thing. The basal metabolic expenditure drops enough for the current level of reduced calories and then some. With time, not only does your body adjust to the reduction, but because of the additional cut, the lost body fat slowly returns. Sound familiar? The long-term solution for reducing body fat is not a cut in calories, but instead a reduction in insulin. Reducing insulin burns body fat. It's the body's overdraft protection, and the only way to activate it is to drain the checking account to zero. How do you empty your body's checking account? The short answer is cut carbs, but it's not quite that simple. As mentioned, protein has an insulin-stimulating effect that can complicate things. The best approach is to simply take a break from food altogether. Take a break from food? Yes, temporarily. Food is the primary stimulus for insulin. No food equals no insulin, and no insulin burns body fat. If you want to burn fat, focus on insulin. Drum roll, please. Now you, my friend, know the single most important fact to start the journey to lasting weight loss. Oh, and by the way, elevated insulin plays a major role in inflammation and is a big-time contributor to heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, and autoimmune disease, just to name a few. The keys to the kingdom of lasting weight loss, incredible health, and amazing vitality are within your reach. Now it's just a matter of learning how. It's time to take everything we've learned and put it to work. And to do that, I've created a special bonus just for you called 3 Steps to Lasting Weight Loss You Can Start Today. It walks you through the essential steps necessary to activate your body's ability to burn fat using the principles discussed in this episode. Before we move on to learning the 3 steps, it's important to review this new understanding of how the body stores and, more importantly, burns fat. Number 1, hands down, without question, understanding the role of insulin is a game changer. We learned that insulin controls fat. When insulin is up, body fat increases, and when insulin goes down, body fat decreases. The fact that nearly all foods either directly or indirectly stimulate the release of insulin, the most effective way to reduce insulin and turn on the body fat burning process is to take a break from food altogether. By the way, the bonus explains how to do this in detail. Number 2, all diets work. Well, for the short term, that is. Now you know why. Reducing caloric intake is met with an equal and even greater reduction in the number of calories required to cover the body's basic needs, the basal metabolic expenditure, or BME. There's a lag between cutting calories and when the lower BME takes full effect. Pounds will be shed during the lag time, but the rate of loss will slow and then plateau with the dreaded return of the hard-fought pounds. All diets work initially, but in the long term, they're a bust. It's a failed strategy based on bad information. Eat less, move more doesn't make good on the promise. It never could. And number 3, and let me say it's super important to emphasize this final point, health and vitality are lifelong goals and require a strategy that delivers lifelong results. Optimizing insulin is essential for that goal. This knowledge allows for a paradigm shift. Obesity is not exclusively an issue of calories. It's a matter of insulin. Lasting weight loss isn't about jumping ship and climbing on board the latest fad diet. Instead, losing the fat and the disease that goes along with it begins with insulin. You won't experience a body that is strong and vital the way you were meant to be until your insulin is restored to normal. The first steps to experiencing that reality are waiting for you. I'm so glad we had this time together. Apply the simple truths explained in this lesson, and you will take the first steps to incredible health. And we're back. Wow, who would have ever thought that insulin was the key to lasting weight loss? But it is, sure enough. And now you know how you can effectively break the barrier, experience the body weight that you want to have. That is a healthy body weight. And the key is intermittent fasting. Make sure you've downloaded the PDF that provides you the 3 easy steps to bringing fasting into your life. It's easy to do. You'll find out quickly. Make sure you watch that video interview that I did with Nicco. He's a fasting superstar, and you'll want to hear his story as he shares a couple of his secrets to how he's lost 109 pounds. That's right, 109 pounds with fasting. So let's review. Here we are. Balancing insulin is the key to long-term weight loss. Do you know, really at the core of health is balance? It really is that simple. And when you think about it, it should be no surprise. Health equals balance. Having a balance in insulin, having a balance in fats, having a balance in fiber. Oh my gosh, I've given you some information about that where we talk about psyllium husk. It's on some of the earlier videos. Make sure you go back to it if you want to learn that one. Omega-3s and omega-6s, we'll talk about that in the future. Inflammation boils down to having a balance internally in your body as it relates to your health. Fasting balances insulin. It's just that simple. You will not overcome unhealthy weight unless you balance your insulin. Fasting equals health. All right, well, get ready, because before we wrap up this segment, I am going to show you right now how the Bible says all of this in Scripture. Are you ready? Here we go. I'm going to jump sides. Woo! There we go. Pretty high tech, huh? So here we are with this Hebrew word shalom. And it gets translated, sure, you may think of it as like a hello, goodbye. In Hawaii, they say aloha. It's kind of like shalom. And so shalom can be a greeting, but it's also the word for health. And understanding shalom and health really pivots in many ways on this last letter in that word. It's spelled shin lamed vav mem, and that letter mem, and just let me tell you, Hebrew's like no other language. Trying to understand the significance and the value of Hebrew, the best way to do it is look at chemistry. Here's why I say that. You know, I could say water, or I could say water. I speak English, so that's my default. I could say agua. I could say many other terms for water, but none of them compare if I said H2O. Most people know H2O, but if you understand what is conveyed with H2O as far as chemistry goes, wow, there's a boatload of information. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, all kinds of information. There's numbers that go along in the periodic table of the elements that go with each one of these that give additional information. And so there's just an encyclopedia of information when I say H2O versus water. Water just doesn't convey all of that additional information. Well, amazingly, but no surprise really, Hebrew does the same thing. Hebrew really is considered to be the language of the Bible, the language that God spoke existence into creation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And for most Bible scholars would agree that Hebrew is that language. And so I'm going to operate on that premise because that's what I believe, and that's also what you're going to have me support for you right now as I explain the Hebrew language. So here's what I can tell you about shalom, health, and balance. You ready? The letter mem is also the number 40. What do I mean by that? Well, the Hebrew alphabet, or the Aleph Beit, is also a numbering system. Aleph is 1, Beit's 2, Gimel's 3, Dalet 4, and on down the line until we get to Mem, which is the number 40. So take yourself into the Bible and the stories of the Bible and think about 40. 40 days and 40 nights, 40 years, 40 days in the desert. So when we think of 40 in those terms, whether it be Israel wandering in the wilderness or Jesus, Yeshua, in the desert, 40 oftentimes is connected with a period of purification and focus. If you haven't seen the video, the interview that I do with Nicco, Nicco is a fasting superstar. He's lost 109 pounds with intermittent fasting. You definitely want to hear his story. We link to it in this lesson, so make sure you catch up with Nicco. But Nicco made a very profound statement as it relates to focus and this whole idea of fasting and 40. And here's what he said. He said, taking your focus off of food and putting your focus on God is really a beautiful aspect of fasting. Well, here comes a little bit more Hebrew that will help you connect with that, biblical Hebrew. I'm going to teach you another word. You know shalom, and now you're going to learn the word tsoom. It's spelled 2 letters, tzade, mem. Well, in the Hebrew, the letters themselves are words, and the words help to understand the significance of the letter as it relates to its usage in other words. Wow, that's kind of cool to think, isn't it? Well, tzade is one of them, and tzade represents a hook, like a fish hook, and it can represent being hooked to something. Well, I'm going to spell this word, tzade, and I'm doing it in the ancient pictographs, which look more like, it kind of looks like a fish hook, right? And so tzade, and then here's mem in the pictographic form, and mem can represent chaos. It's also very much connected with the word mayim, which is the word for water. But in this sense, if we think of it in terms of 40, so tsoom is to be hooked to a time of 40. Well, what do we understand 40 to be? It's a time of purification. It's a time of focus. It's a time to restore balance. Taking focus off of the physical and putting it onto the spiritual, onto Hashem, onto Yeshua, onto Jesus. Putting our focus there. Well, this is a word, tzade mem, hooking yourself to 40, and the way we say it is tsoom, and it's the word for fasting. How about that? So fasting in Hebrew literally means to hook yourself to 40. Like Yeshua in the desert or Israel in the wilderness, a time to place our focus off of the physical and onto the spiritual, a time of purification, of balancing body and soul. So I just wanted to share this biblical health truth with you. Sometimes Scripture gives us just this beautiful hug, if you will, and I really believe it happens here with shalom and with tsoom, with fasting. And it tells us that health comes when we restore balance to our lives. It tells us that fasting is a time that, although it might be challenging, and it sure can be, but if we do it together, if we lean on each other, if we lean on the Lord, it's much easier. And we can look forward knowing that when we come out of that fast, that we will have clarity, we'll have focus, we'll have balance, we'll be restored. So I hope that helps you in this process. This is Dr. Chris Greene saying I'll see you in our next episode where we're going to talk about more balance and we're going to talk about all these great additional things that we shared with you. And so with that, we'll part by saying shalom. Hi, this is Dr. Chris Greene, and I have a special friend to share with you. This is my good buddy Nicco, and Nicco is going to share with you his experience with fasting. And I want to tell you, Nicco is a fasting superstar. So when we were talking before, you told me that you've taken your weight from 385 all the way down to currently you're about 275 or so now?
Yeah,
276?
275, 276.
Awesome. And that's been mostly through fasting?
Mostly through fasting, yeah.
Okay. And now when we say fasting, just so everybody knows, we're not talking like you don't eat for a month and then you start eating again. So tell us what your fasting is, how long it is that you take a break between food.
Okay, well, I'm doing an intermittent fasting where I don't fast like 5-6 days at a time. What I do is I try to have between my last meal of the day and my first meal of the next day, I try to have a minimum of 12 to maybe 15 hours in between that.
Okay.
So if I eat my last meal at 9 o'clock at night, I probably won't eat until noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day.
Perfect. So what Nicco just shared with you is exactly what you have in your top 3 tips to quick lasting weight loss, is that fasting is not like going days without food. No, we're just talking about taking a 12 to, what'd you say, 15?
12 to 15 hours.
12 to 15 hours break of food. I mean, really, when you think about it, you go to bed at 9 o'clock. Let's say you go to bed at 9 o'clock, because I know you got some crazy hours.
Yeah.
But let's say a person goes to bed at 9 o'clock. Well, shoot, if you wake up at, let's say you're an early riser at 5, get yourself going, 6, 6:30, you only have a few more hours.
Right, exactly.
And it's 9 o'clock, and you get to eat again. So it's not this huge deprivation.
It's just like maybe skipping breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right. I mean, at worst.
Right.
And so I think you had told me a story where you had people ask you about the fact that you fast. Mm-hmm. And they said something to the effect of, oh, are you like starving yourself? Or how do you go so long with...
They were afraid of the constant hunger pains.
Oh, and yeah, so tell everybody about hunger pains.
Well, the two important things that I found out about hunger pains is that one very important thing is most people in the United States are dehydrated.
Yeah.
And they have false hunger pains because their body is actually thirsty and saying, give me water, I need to cleanse.
Yeah.
So by increasing my water intake up to a little over 3 liters of pure water a day,
great.
and cutting out all the sodas and the caffeines and things like that, it really has helped alleviate a lot of those false hunger pains.
Right.
And the other thing is that, like, as you say, you go to bed, you sleep through most of it, and then you get up.
Right.
And at first, maybe a week or two, you kind of feel I'm eating because I feel like I need to.
Right.
But it's really because we've trained ourselves in America never to let our stomachs be empty.
Oh, no kidding! Isn't that the truth?
And so we feel like we're hungry and we need to eat because we're so uncomfortable with an empty stomach.
Right.
But the reality is that our body is saying, "Oh, I need this rest. Just let me rest for a couple more hours.
Seriously.
Before you put more food in me."
Yeah. Right.
And the water really helps. You drink a glass of water, you wait 30 minutes. If you're not still hungry, you're good to go.
Right. Okay, so if you're wondering about the noise, we're just here at synagogue, it's on Shabbat, and we caught up with each other afterwards, and so a little bit of racket and stuff, no big deal, right? So anyways, Nicco and I were just talking about this whole issue of, as a culture, like in the United States, we always feel like we've got to have food in our stomach. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't eat in the last half hour. So just give me some thoughts on that.
Well, we use food to celebrate good things. We use food to entertain us when we're bored.
Oh, no kidding.
We use food just mindlessly sitting in front of the television, just feeding stuff in it because the commercial says this is fun, and a lot of times I know in the past I've had a problem where if I'm bored or I'm depressed, having something in your stomach, having a physical thing going on, will helps me to forget whatever emotional or mental thing I'm dealing with. So you eat away the pain, you eat away the depression, things like that.
Right. Food becomes your crutch, really.
It does.
All right, so let's just jump to the chase here and get Nicco's top tips for fasting. Give me 2 top tips for fasting.
The 2 top tips, just make purified water your friend.
Okay.
I started
Number
out,
1, purified water. And you said what, about 3 liters a day that you drink?
Right, over 3 liters usually.
Okay.
I started out I measured how I'm drinking 4 or 5 glasses of water a day.
Right.
Over the course of several days, I just began to increase, drink 1 more glass, until I got to where over 3 liters, approximately a gallon of distilled water a day.
All right.
And I was drinking distilled water for about a month or so.
Right. Okay, but you get that 3 liters a day, though.
At least.
At least. Okay,
Yeah.
so did you catch that? At least 3 liters. So that's the better part of a gallon.
Mm-hmm,
right? Okay.
And talk to your doctor before you do it, because
Perfect.
people that drink too much water too fast can become waterlogged and create some serious health issues.
Yes.
So take it slow as you begin to increase.
Take it slow. This is a really key point. And then, so give us your last number 2, Nicco's top tip.
Number 2 is just start to keep your mind focused on positive things instead of on eating.
Yes.
If you're constantly eating while you're watching TV, you know what? Change your mind. When the commercial comes on, do some sit-ups or push-ups or some DV bends. Maybe let go of that television and read a good book. Keep your mind active. I like to listen to some CDs of these from my favorite ministers. Right? Or listen to music. Vivaldi, the 4 Seasons are my favorite. Mozart is also one of my favorite composers. Just keep your mind off of food.
Awesome.
If you're at work, you don't think about food until it's lunchtime. have a thing where you got a big salad with some lean protein on top of it.
Okay.
You know, just keep your mind off of food and doing positive things.
Or you could be like Bill and you could just vacuum
Constantly
all the time.
vacuuming the synagogue, right? we gave him lunch early, so now he's got a lot of energy. Yeah.
You could just vacuum all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, well, housework isn't like going out and running a marathon, but it's doing something, keeping active.
Seriously, right? I mean, as much as we joke about it just now, it's true though. You got to get your mind off of always thinking about food.
Become comfortable with who you are, and especially for those of you who are God-fearing people, become comfortable with your relationship with the Lord.
Amen.
You get that straight, and when you start to get a peace inside, you don't have the constant draw towards food because you feel empty or lost or hurting.
So great. Well, let's wrap it there.
Okay.
Thanks, Nicco. This has been
You're
great.
welcome. Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's my pleasure to help.
And so anyways, this is Nicco. He's done so good with fasting, 12 to 15 hours a day just to break in food. It works. He's dropped his weight tremendously, and he's still going down.
Still going down?
So
Yeah.
excited for you.
Right, thank you.
All right. Praise God.
God bless you, and
Thank
good luck
you.
to you.